We've been provided another example of what not to be doing on social media. Let me back up and start at the beginning. Former Prime Minister to Australia, Tony Abbott, was boarding a flight, flying out of Sydney, Australia. And I think he was going to Japan. It was a trade mission. And he took a picture and put it on social media. Took a picture of his boarding pass and put it on social media. Kind of like what many of us will do. Hey, I'm at the airport. I'm heading off to Japan, and they'll put a picture up. But it had his boarding pass on it. And a hacker and his buddy, who had been talking apparently about, I wonder what you can learn from a boarding pass. One hacker dared the other hacker, wonder what you can get. Well, it turns out that the hacker, and to be clear, I'm not sure if this hacker is what they would call a white hat, or a good hacker, or I'm going to assume yes, because he came forward and gave the information out and didn't do anything malicious with it. So I'm going to think he was a white hat, and not a bad hat, which would be somebody that would then try to cause harm to the former Prime Minister of Australia. So turns out that the hacker's name, his last name was Hope. Mr. Hope claims that within 45 minutes of having that picture on social media of the boarding pass to the aircraft, he was able to get into the former Prime Minister's profile with the airline, and within the code of the website, find out his passport number and his telephone number and some other information. 45 minutes, folks, from the time of seeing the picture online to he had all this information. Now, what did he do with it? He turned around and actually tried to get a hold of the Australian authorities to say, hey, I was able to do this. Someone may want to look into this. And the former Prime Minister should be protected. Now, former Prime Minister is still working in a government role as a trade envoy, I understand. So, turning it into the authorities, probably the right thing to do. And they said, yeah, thanks guy. We'll look into it. And then he spent a lot of time, he claims several months, trying to get a hold of the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, to give him a heads up that his information was available within 45 minutes online, that he probably should change his phone number and whatnot. And now Mr. Hope said he could have just called the phone number that he found, but he thought that might be a little bit too intrusive, and I think he was probably right. Calling the former Prime Minister on a private telephone number and saying, hey, I hacked your account from a social media post, probably wouldn't have been the right move. So it took a couple of months before he could get to a personal assistant of the former Prime Minister, who at that time said, yes, we were made aware by the authorities of the problem. Qantas Airlines came out, that was the airline where the boarding pass was for, came out and said, yep, there was an issue. Thank you for pointing out that there was some flaw in the code. We have since corrected it, and things are good. But it just kind of goes to show that if you take something that you don't consider super important, right? Like it was a boarding pass. Who would think that someone would be able to take that information from the boarding pass and then potentially could have wreaked havoc on the former Prime Minister's life? Hackers think differently than you and I. They don't look at a boarding pass and go, oh, he was getting on an airplane. It's like, oh, hey, there's a little bit of information there in the picture that he's given up. I wonder what I can do with that. Where can I get to with that? And how can I turn that into a buck? Again, in this case, Mr. Hope appears he was a white hat hacker and did the right thing and tried to make people aware, which he did. And clearly they went and shut it down. But the moral of the story is, folks, we are putting a lot of stuff out on social media, and you may not think that what you're providing can be used against you in the court of hackers to wreak havoc and to steal money from you, but it can. I've talked about in the past about those quizzes online that ask, what's your mother's maiden name, and where were you born, and all those type of questions that can be used as security questions. Many sites use those. Or one of the ones that I remember when it came out, I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. It was like, what's your Star Wars name? You put in and it's one piece of information that's private about you and another piece of information that's private about you, and they put it together in a cute little Star Wars name, and ooh, isn't that nice? And that thing spread like wildfire. But that's, the first time I kind of looked at something and went, wait a minute, those are two pieces of personal information that could potentially lead to a security question at a website. A matter of fact, chances are the questions that were made for that quiz were because a hacker was trying to exploit a certain website. Let's use the former Prime Minister example, Qantas. Someone was trying to get into a Qantas website, but they needed a couple of pieces of information. So we created this great little quiz. We put it online. It gets shared. And guess what? Every time that gets shared and people respond to it, that links back to the hacker. They get to see all that stuff. I did an experiment on that not long ago. I put it out on my Facebook page and was kind of curious as to who would play along. And a lot of people did. And the one I put out was, one of those, hey, there's 6 people in the room and one person walks in and blah, blah, blah happens. How many people are left? And people will go in and put in their answer. Now, there was nothing nefarious about it, and there was no private information that was being given. It was kind of a fun quiz. But I wanted to see just how far that thing would spread and how many people would link back to me. It was a lot. A lot. So if I was being mean-spirited, and I could come up with some cute little quiz that piqued someone's interest, and people were willing to start sharing that thing, and it went viral, I could gather a lot of intelligence and use that against you. So, bottom line is, be very careful what information you're posting out on social media. You might think it's not something that can be used against you, but if it's got any personal information about you that can be used as a stepping stone to get somewhere else, like the former Prime Minister, a boarding pass, who would have thought? That stuff can be used against you, so you got to be careful. Hey, folks, thanks a lot for sticking with me through this. And we're going to keep putting more stuff out during Cybersecurity Month. I hesitated about saying that, but today happens to be the beginning of Cybersecurity Month 2020. There, I've now dated when this was recorded. But we'll have more coming out throughout the month. Thanks a lot for sticking with me, and stay safe out there.